Welcome to the sovereign system, the only place where we don't just analyze the system, we architect a way out. Are you tired of being told you're a component, a mere cog in a machine you don't understand? We reject the idea that your only goal is to survive the chaos. Our purpose is to become sovereign, that is, fully decoupled, resilient, and in command of your own life. Each week, we use a powerful 360-degree framework combining Terence McKenna's novelty theory, occult history, material sciences, and the intentional change model to cut through the noise and reveal the forces shaping your reality. I'm Dave, one of your hosts. While I often dive deep into galaxy brain complex systems, my co-host John ensures I stay grounded and focused on practical, real-world steps.
That's right, Dave. My job is to be the street level translator. I make sure that everything we discuss, from the massive novelty spikes to the four quadrants of reality, is immediately actionable in your day to day life. We're here to build the bridge between the grand geopolitical chess game and the health of your mind, body, and bank account.
Not only bank account, but also your soul. But let's dive in. This is the sovereign system. On this episode, we are tearing down the boundaries between hard science and esoteric manifestation with Dr. Carol Dweck's famous growth mindset work. Uh, what if our brain isn't generating consciousness, but just receiving it? We look at a cutting-edge MIT research suggesting your physical brain might actually be an antenna, like we've been kind of trying to say the last few episodes. We're also diving deep into Dr. Carol Dweck's famous growth mindset, but not the corporate version. We'll show you how to use it to escape the clinical identity cages society tries to lock you in. And then John is going to explain how to bypass the systemic DMV of the soul and merge behavioral psychology with the law of assumption to create a sudden, accelerated leap in your personal evolution. Finally, we're giving you a 7-day reality warping challenge to put it all to the test. Let's get into it.
Sounds great, Dave. Let's get started with this week's novelty spike.
John, we often talk about novelty spikes, and this one's the perfect bridge. Researchers at MIT are using a technology called transcranial focused ultrasound to non-invasively map the physical origin points of human consciousness.
Whoa, stop. Transcranial focus ultrasound? Sounds like they're trying to give our brains a deep tissue massage with a tiny robot. What did they find when they probed the hardware?
The clinical fact they found is that consciousness isn't primarily arising in the big, smart frontal areas of the brain where we do all our logical thinking. The material findings are actually pushing us towards the esoteric.
Wait, so the data is saying our brain's CEO is actually located somewhere in the back office? That's fantastic. The materialists were looking for the power source in the command center, but the power was coming from a hidden reactor. So, what's the sovereign breakthrough?
The breakthrough for our architects is the cutting edge theory that consciousness might not be the brain's output, but actually its input. The universe isn't waiting for your brain to create reality. It's broadcasting reality to your brain.
Yes, the brain is the antenna. The old system, the patient path, tells you your antenna is broken. A trauma is just a ghost in the machine messing with the signal. But this finding means we stop being a passive patient and start being the one who tunes the dial. It's about data sovereignty over your own reception.
That brings us to Dweck's work. The passive patient John just described as a trap in a fixed mindset. Clinically, this means you assume your intelligence, your character, and your ability to change are static, unchangeable givens. You think, I am permanently broken.
Right, and that fixed mindset, that's the moment the heroes descend. Every hero starts in the identity cage, the false belief that they are fundamentally flawed. They give you a diagnosis, which becomes your identity cage.
Yeah, and that mindset physically prevents you from learning from mistakes. You see failures as a final verdict, not a data point. This is the lie we must dismantle across all four quadrants in this episode.
Hold up, let me translate the escape plan. Look at the quadrant one, the inner world. Dave, the clinical view is you are permanently broken. The esoteric truth? Trauma is just a stagnant state of consciousness. Manifesting requires assuming a new state. You are shifting from a broken file to a consciously choosing your identity.
Exactly. You move from the odd self, what the system tells you you are, to the ideal self, the sovereign architect. The journey isn't to fix the broken patient, it's to activate the sovereign architect. That's the hero's descent.
So that wraps up the Novelty Spike segment. We should probably dive into this week's body of research by Dweck, famous behaviorist who wrote the literal book on how mindset can affect everything. And it's how Dave will frame his side of the deep dive this week. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, let's look at the source material kind of before we go into our four quadrants discussion on it, kind of looking at both, from my perspective, the materialist or science, and your perspective, the esoteric, what's really going on here. So in mindset, Dweck breaks down the fixed mindset as a rigid biological prison. If you believe your intelligence or your character is just a static, unchangeable given, you're essentially running on read-only software. You can't write any new code because you don't think the hardware allows it.
It's the identity cage, Dave. Dweck is basically describing a soul in a straitjacket. If you hit a wall in the book, the fixed mindset person sees it as a verdict. It's not just, I failed at this task, it's, I'm a failure. They're terrified of looking stupid, so they stop exploring. They're a patient waiting for a cure that never comes because they think their DNA is a life sentence.
You know what? You're right. But the growth mindset is the clinical pivot. Dweck's research shows that when you view your basic qualities as things you can cultivate through effort, your brain actually changes. You start seeing a challenge not as a threat to your ego, but as a novelty spike, a necessary data point for an upgrade.
Boom! That's the sovereign architect move. You stop avoiding the hero's descent into the unknown and start craving it. In the book, the growth minded people don't just cope with failure, they use it as a high octane fuel. They realize the antenna isn't broken, it just needs to be tuned through the friction of the struggle. Effort is what ignites the signal.
Yeah. Again, now that we've kind of wrapped up what growth mindset is and Carol Dweck's work, we're actually going to jump right into the map with quadrant one, the inner subjective experience. If we look through a materialist's lens, we hit Carol Dweck's foundational research on the fixed mindset. This is the clinical belief that our character, our intelligence, and our trauma responses are static givens. It's a finite way of thinking where you believe you are permanently defined by your past. In this model, trauma is a broken file in the brain, and you are the diagnosis.
Dave, that right there is the trap. You are your diagnosis. That is the ultimate fixed mindset. The esoteric truth here is completely different. Trauma isn't a permanent stain on your soul, it's just an old, sticky state of consciousness. You're wearing it like a bad thrift store jacket, but I do like thrift stores, Dave.
A thrift store jacket, John. We're talking about deeply ingrained psychological conditioning here. When a patient gets a clinical label, it dictates their entire treatment plan. You can't just take it off.
But that's exactly what the system wants you to think. If you accept the system's view that you have a maladaptive memory, you are essentially renting your identity from a clinical diagnosis. You become a passive patient waiting for a repairman. You're giving away your sovereign power to a label. Manifesting a new reality, a growth mindset on steroids, requires assuming a totally new state of being.
So you're not denying the pain exists. I get that. You're saying the framework we use to view the pain is flawed. If I view my trauma as a permanent brain injury, I'm stuck. If I view it as an outdated internal map, I can redraw it.
Exactly. Why should our listeners care? Because if you buy into the fixed materialist view, you walk around repeating, I am permanently broken. The sovereign win is dropping the victim act. You move from I am traumatized to I am the awareness observing the temporary constriction. You stop asking, what is wrong with me? And start asking, where is my map currently out of date? That, my friend, is the shift from victimhood to architectural intent.
Yeah, no, that's actually a fantastic way to put it, John. I really appreciate your enthusiasm. All right, let's move into quadrant two, the physical objective reality. This is where the rubber meets the road. In Carol Dweck's materialist framework, a fixed mindset physically prevents you from learning from mistakes. In her research, she points out that if in a fixed mindset, we become terrified to not know something or to fail. Brain scan studies actually back this up. When people with a fixed mindset make an error, their brain activity flatlines. The hardware literally shuts down to protect the ego.
Dave, buddy, you're talking about the human body like it's a busted 1998 Dell desktop running Windows Me. The hardware shuts down. Listen to me. The esoteric truth is that the body is just a mirror of the mind. It's an antenna. If your brain is flatlining, it's because you're tuned into 98.6 FM victim radio.
It's not victim radio, John. It's a documented psychological response. Dweck asks a great question in her book. Why waste time proving over and over how great you are when you could be getting better? But if you don't process the error neurologically, your body chemically traps you in a stress loop. You can't just wish away cortisol.
Exactly my point. But the system tells you that a stress loop is a permanent glitch. I knew a guy, let's call him Sweaty Steve. He's sweaty. Steve had a full blown panic attack every time he tried to launch a business. Every single time. His doctor told him his meat suit was broken, gave him pills to dampen the signal, but Dave didn't have a broken meat suit. He had a high gain antenna picking up too much static.
I mean, I know I didn't have a broken meat suit, but Sweaty Steve, okay. What happened to Steve's antenna?
Once Steve claimed data sovereignty over his physical vessel, he realized his racing heart wasn't a malfunction. It was rocket fuel. He started doing breath work, tuning the dial. Suddenly, the panic turned into pure manifestation energy. He stopped trying to shut down the hardware and started driving it.
That actually tracks with Dweck's concept of the power of yet. You're not broken, you just haven't turned the dial yet. To translate Steve's sweaty rocket fuel into clinical terms, you're saying we need to stop viewing psychological anxiety as a hardware failure and more as raw data we can learn to process.
Yes, because why should the audience care if you treat your body like a flawed hardware? You're just sitting in the waiting room waiting for a mechanic who is never going to call your name. When you claim data sovereignty, you start tuning that physical vessel for exponential growth. You aren't broken, Dave. You just need to adjust your antenna.
Yeah, no, you got me there, John. Let's shift to quadrant three, the cultural shared narrative. This is how the collective views us. In Dweck's materialist model, a fixed mindset assumes that our character, intelligence, and creative abilities are static givens. But here's the real danger. Society adopts this fixed mindset about you. The culture loves to reinforce your limitations, limiting your potential based on what it thinks you are set for life to do.
Society treats us like we're in the produce aisle, Dave. They look at you, slap a barcode sticker on your forehead that says anxious, not a math person or mid level management material, and they scan you at the register of life. Beep! There you go into the societal grocery bag with the other bruised apples.
Yeah, the produce aisle, right. But clinically speaking, it's true. The system is built on standardized testing and diagnostic codes. If you get a label, society builds a structure around it. But holding a growth mindset about your intelligence profoundly affects the way you lead your life. The problem is breaking out of that cultural label is incredibly difficult because the collective wants you in that box. It makes you predictable.
It makes you manageable, Dave. The esoteric truth here is that you have to absolutely reject the 3D consensus. If 10 million people agree that you are a broken, anxious mess, that is just a shared hallucination. You don't have to participate in their group project.
Oh. You're talking about cognitive reframing on a macro scale.
I'm talking about assuming a new mythic identity. I knew a guy, let's call him Average Andy. Society told Andy his ceiling was mid management at a paper cup company. He had a clinical diagnosis for generalized anxiety and a credit score of 580. But Andy woke up one day, rejected the 3D consensus, and decided his mythic identity was the financial warlock. Did he know magic? No. But he stopped answering to the barcode society slapped on him. He stepped entirely out of the matrix of what a guy like Andy is supposed to do.
And I suppose the financial warlock is doing well now.
He owns 3 car washes and a yacht named the Matrix Breaker, Dave. Look, the point is this. Why should the audience care? Because these cultural labels, these diagnostic codes society gives you, they are identity cages.
And people often stay in the cage because it's comfortable. A diagnosis removes the responsibility of having to grow.
Yes! The cage is furnished. It's got a nice little water bottle and a running wheel. It's a really quick wheel, but you are not a hamster. But you are not your diagnosis. The sovereign wind is walking out of the clinic, ripping up the prescription pad of societal expectations and evolving into your mythic self. You build your own cage, Dave, or you build a castle.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would prefer to build a castle myself. Definitely don't want to put myself in a cage. But that's some pretty good stuff there, John. So, all right, bringing it home with quadrant four, the systemic environmental layer. We've talked about the inner mind, the physical body, and the culture, and now we look at the actual machinery of society, institutions, healthcare, corporate structures. In Carol Dweck's materialist view, a fixed system inherently stunts human potential. These systems operate on the assumption that talent is a finite resource, but a growth mindset proves that intelligence, abilities, and talents are fundamentally learnable and capable of improvement through effort.
The machinery, Dave? Systemic institutions are just the DMV of the human soul. You walk in, take a little paper ticket numbered 4,000 and wait for some bored bureaucrat behind the bulletproof glass to tell you if you're allowed to heal today. Sorry, sir, your trauma processing form is missing a signature. Please go back to the end of the line.
The DMV of the soul. Okay, that's not totally inaccurate. Our medical and corporate systems are built on fixed regulatory frameworks. They require standardized treatment plans. You have to fit their diagnostic billing codes to get the approved path to recovery or success. But, so essentially, again, it's another one of these velvet ropes that we talk about often on the podcast.
Exactly. A velvet rope guarded by a bouncer named Managed Care holding a clipboard. But Dave, here's the ultimate esoteric truth. It breaks the entire matrix. Inner transformation reshapes your outer environment. The 3D world is just delayed shadow of your internal state. If you change your internal frequency, the external system must wrap around you. It's physics. Well, esoteric physics, but you get it.
Esoteric physics? Right. Let's ground that. You're calling a wrapping of the system or warping of the system is what researchers call adopting learn goals and strategy focused attributions. When somebody stops viewing the system as an immovable wall, they start to find back doors. They use strategy.
Dave, I'm talking about kicking the wall down with your mind. Let me tell you about a guy. Let's call him Corporate Carl. I know a lot of Corporate Carls. Carl worked at a soul crushing logistics firm. The system said Carl was a level 2 associate and would need 15 years to become a level 3 associate. Pure fixed mindset environment. Carl was waiting for the system to give him a permission slip to be awesome. Then Carl finds the sovereign teachings. He starts doing breath work in his Honda Civic. He starts vibrating at the frequency of his CEO. He stops asking his manager for permission, and he starts manifesting reality.
And what did the system do to this corporate Carl?
The system short circuited, Dave. Carl didn't just get level 3, he bypassed HR entirely, pitched the VP in an elevator, and got handed a new division. He hacked the simulation.
Uh-huh. So Carl stopped waiting for the institution to validate him and took ownership of his environment?
Boom! Why should the audience care? Because right now, someone listening to this is waiting for their therapist, their boss, or their doctor to give them a license to heal. They're waiting for the bouncer to unhook the velvet rope, but the license to heal belongs to you. It's in your pocket.
You bypass the restrictive system altogether by becoming your own architect. The fixed system doesn't stand a chance against a sovereign individual with a growth mindset.
Drop the paper ticket, walk out of that DMV of the soul, and start building your empire.
Yep. All right, well, let's tie this entire sovereign map together. We've covered the 4 quadrants of how you interact with reality. Quadrant 1, the inner mind, where you stop treating trauma like a permanent brain injury and start redrawing your own mental map. Quadrant 2, the physical body, where we tuned your sweaty, panicked meat suit like a high-gain antenna. Quadrant 3, the cultural narrative, where we ripped off society's barcode and embraced your mythic identity. And finally, Quadrant 4, the systemic environment, where we bypass the DMV of the soul.
Dave, if you string all 4 of those together, it sounds like the world's weirdest corporate retreat. Welcome to the Marriott. Tune your meat suit, rip off your barcode, and bypass the DMV. But it is exactly what we are doing. We are hacking the 3D game.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. But to make this actionable, we need to look at what happens when you actually implement this. In Carol Dweck's work, a growth mindset doesn't just make you feel warm and fuzzy. It literally gives you the freedom to improve and choose your own path for your life. Neuroplastically, when you believe you can grow, your brain actually starts searching the environment for evidence and opportunities. You begin taking relentlessness, behavioral action. Your reality changes because your choices change. It's practical, observable science.
Practical science, Dave, buddy. Let me introduce you to my man, Neville Goddard, okay? Or Aleister Crowley, or even The Secret. If we want to go mainstream, Oprah for a second, what Dweck calls neuroplasticity, the mythics call the lawofassumption. Neville Goddard said that the feeling is the secret. When you assume the state of the person you want to be, when you emotionally vibrate at that frequency, the 3D world has no choice but to rearrange itself to match you.
So you're saying Dweck's growth mindset and Goddard's law of assumption are exactly the same mechanism, just dressed in different outfits?
It's the exact same juice in a different cup. Crowley defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. What is a growth mindset if not causing change through your will? You don't just hustle your way to new reality, Dave. You assume the feeling of the new reality, and then the hustle feels like a breeze.
Yeah, which brings us to the ultimate synthesis for the audience, the sovereign breakthrough. You cannot just sit on your couch, vibrate at a high frequency, and wait for $1 million to drop through your ceiling. That's esoteric laziness. But you can't also just grind 80 hours a week while hating yourself. That's behavioral burnout.
You have to merge them.
Yes, you combine behavioral growth, relentless strategic physical action in the real world with esoteric growth, which is your internal energetic alignment.
Boom! When you merge physical effort with mystical intention, you don't just get gradual improvement, you create a novelty spike, a growth spurt, a sudden accelerated leap in your personal evolution. The universe looks at your action, feels your energy, and says, "Oh, we are skipping levels today?"
So here is your actionable takeaway for today. First, pick one fixed belief you have about yourself. Write down the growth version of it. I am not good at doing math, or I can't sing, or I'm really bad at crossword puzzles. And instead say, actually, I'm really good at crossword puzzles, but feel that you love those crossword puzzles and then, learn how to do it. Second, spend 5 minutes feeling what it would actually be like if that new belief were actually already true.
Feel it in your bones. Let your high gain antenna hum with it.
And finally, take one immediate physical action in the real world that aligns with that new belief. Marry the mystical with the material and watch your reality warp. So, how do we actually put this sovereign breakthrough into practice? We call this the sovereign win. It starts with an immediate actionable takeaway. Right now, I want you to identify one fixed belief you have about yourself. It could be, I'm bad with money, or my body just handles stress poorly. Write it down and then rewrite it as a growth opportunity. Shift to, I am currently learning how to manage my finances, or I am building my nervous system's reliance.
Yes, take that fixed belief, write it on a piece of paper, and then physically burn it, or, just aggressively recycle it if, you're indoors. Feel the release. You are officially redrawing your internal map.
Yeah, tearing it up works just fine, John. Once you've reframed that belief, we are moving into the intentional change models experimentation phase this week. So we've gone over a bunch of stuff in our previous different episodes. Now we're going to teach you how to experiment with this stuff. So we're going to challenge you to do a 7-day test. For the next week, you're going to pick one tangible physical daily habit. Let's say spending 15 minutes reviewing your budget or doing 10 minutes of, morning mobility work. That's your behavioral growth.
And then you hit it with the esoteric growth. This is where we mix the chemical with the alchemy, Dave. Before you do that 15-minute physical habit, you sit for just 2 minutes. You close your eyes and you feel the relief and power of already being the person who has mastered that skill. You assume the state of the sovereign. You tune the physical antenna, and then you do the physical work.
Exactly. Relentless actions paired with energetic alignment. Do this for 7 days straight. Document the real-time shifts in your reality. Notice how the physical habit starts to feel frictionless, and watch how your external environment starts to adapt to your new mindset.
7 days, folks. Marry the hustle with the vibration. You are the architect. Now go build your empire. We'll see you next week.